Is it me? Or did that longshoreman strike end prematurely? All right, you white motherfuckers, all eyes on me. This is the I Refuse podcast. This is Mr. Foxy I Refuse podcast. Who I'm back here to talk about some things that's been on my mind the last 24 hours. Y'all are really gonna get sick of me after this, but gotta talk about it. So, first things first. Hi, I'm Mr. Foxy I Refuse podcast. Welcome. So glad you can come. You know, I was minding my African American business, like I always do. And yet again, can't make it 2 days. Shit, barely a day at this point, without any nonsense. This longshoreman strike. I wasn't tripping at first, like y'all were. Acting like it was Y2K again. Going out to the Walmart, going out to the Target, going out to the Boscovs, going out wherever, buying up all this damn toilet paper. Like y'all don't have running water and washcloths at home. Just saying. Y'all doing it again. Buying the toilet paper, buying up all the milk, buying up all the buying up all the hot balls of the water. Like, y'all really were acting like it was the end of days again. Y'all pulled the same shit. Wasn't tripping then. Cause I'm like, this is interesting. You know, the strikes are nothing new. You know, security guards go on strike, Amazon workers go on strike. You know, it's your prerogative to strike, right? But then, by the next time I had coffee, 2 or 3 days later, the longshoreman strike was over. After just 3 days. Now, in that time, you know, at the beginning, you know, this Harold Daggett guy, who is the president of the union, was out there with the people, all in the news camera, just being very fiery, being very passionate, being somewhat charismatic. I'm just going off what y'all been saying, and I've been watching the news a little bit. I'm like, okay, this is nothing new. You know, some of us that have been part of a union are like, okay, this man is about getting this done. Now, initially, when news first broke that the strike was happening, there was word that all the truckers and all the portsman people wanted a 77% pay raise across the board. I was like, ooh, that's a little high. That's a little high. Now, I don't know the wage and the salary of a longshoreman and a trucker and all these peoples. But there was one person that made a very valid point. Like, we're working during the pandemic. We've been working since, you know, the pandemic. Never slowed down, never stopped. All we're just asking for is, I think he said, $2 increase. I was like, that's not bad. And I was like, well, why strike now though? Like, we're about 4 or 5 seasons into the pandemic. But, you know, strike when you can, you know? Then I realized, oh, this is right around, like, the beginning of the fiscal year, end of the fiscal year, for those of you that don't know. I was like, okay, maybe, you know, it's definitely a contract thing. This is probably around the time that contract renewals happen, and they want to strike now. I don't know how long before this point that they had been griping. I'm like, okay, if you've been busting your ass in all kinds of weather, sick, not sick, possibly had, you know, old girl in your throat, didn't have old girl in your throat, didn't know, was working around people that possibly had old girl in their throat, possibly didn't, working regardless, putting your body and your health, secondary or tertiary, to the job. I mean, what's $2? So I was like, okay, cool. So when it got down to the news that came out recently that the strike was over, I'm foreshadowing with these air quotes. It's like, damn, that was quick. In the history of Norma Ray, who is a fictional movie character, but is a culmination of various figures who are working their ass off, abandoning their families, dedicated to the job, and possibly working illegally by labor laws. Working that you just going. Like, what's $2, right? I've seen strikes last longer than 3 days. A week, couple of weeks, even longer. And the outcome sometimes is that these people are either moved on or forced out, and they just bring in a new batch of security guards. And, you know, they're pretty, I'm using that as an example out of my own life. I'm not a security guard. I'm just talking on what I've seen. And they'll do it right outside the gate as you're coming into work, and you're giving up the thumbs up. I've seen people do it. And then before you know it, you don't see those people anymore. Or it in a PR publicity move, they'll give a think piece or a temporary agreement just for you to stop making them look bad in these streets. Not illegal, but definitely moves can be made, right? Again, I'm foreshadowing. So, for the Longshoreman strike to end in 3 days, I was like, that's interesting. That's the first thing, the first red flag. Then a couple of things started to materialize in the past 24 hours. You know, this Harold Daggett guy, I would say he, in my eyes, this is my opinion, when you have the kind of person, and I touched on this on Monday's episode of the podcast, season 6 available everywhere where you get your podcasts, the kind of people that to the public is saying the right things, is getting people inspired and all this other stuff, but possibly could very well possibly be in favor behind the scenes when nobody's looking. Like I said, 3 days is a relatively short strike, and it's, when I say it's concluded, it's essentially a temporary situation to give people time until January 15th. That's an interesting date. To negotiate, figure out salaries, things of that nature. Then I thought, this is within 5 or so weeks away from the elections. This is very strange. This is very interesting. Then come to find out that apparently, allegedly, Harold Daggett is shoulder buddies with 45. There's a picture that came up of them shaking hands and looking quite chummy. And it's allegedly word on the street is that he told union folks and the workers to pray for 45. I was like, isn't this like a conflict of interest? So, for it to end in 3 days, and Biden has come out and applauded the move. Bless Biden. It's no disrespect, but this is my opinion. When you are of a certain age, I think the tunnel vision is a little bit smaller. I don't think he's seeing outside of the move and what this means. I've said before that 45 has been pulling stunts, and with that, there are no details as to the outcome of those stunts. You haven't heard any more about the 2 attempts. You've seen more production or accountability shows for the heads and the powers that be of the Secret Service. And just like with that, you haven't seen or heard any details as to what and how the strike was concluded. And I'm like, It's not lost on me that some of y'all are essentially sustaining a celebrity. And when I say celebrity, a person that is for the camera, a person that is for the attention, it's giving basic minimum requirements for a job. And I jokingly said back in 2016 that if this person can make it into the most coveted position, I don't want to have to take another assessment. Like applying for a job, and during the course of applying for the job, there are up to 6 assessments for this job. I quit after the 3rd one. And then it's like, when you get past all of that, there are like 4 or 5 interviews for a job that doesn't pay all that well. I'm like, after the 3rd interview, after the 3rd assessment, just give you my start date and I'll just move in. Because what are we doing here? I shouldn't have to, and y'all shouldn't have to either, if all it takes really is to have the gift of gab at this point. Like, the bar is low. And look at what has happened the past almost 10 years. Just saying. So it led me to think, okay, strike is over that fast. Never seen that happen in the history of my life. You got this Daggett guy who doesn't really give me the presence of mind that he is that effective, because there are more days behind this thing than there are in front. I'm sure there have been long-standing issues for years that have led a lot of the longshoremen and the port workers to reach a breaking point, only for it to be resolved in 3 days. And for you to say to folks to pray for 45, why? What's he got to do with all of this? I'm not Oda Mae Brown, but it's giving that old boy was paid off. And if he wasn't outrightly, there was more benefit discussed and persuaded in his direction to resolve this. I mean, we are talking about somebody that's cross. I'm talking about the other person, not Daggett. That is known to that cross many ethical and moral lines. Like, there's literally nothing starving his ambitions to get back in there and do his thing, whatever that is. Just saying. I mean, do you see? Like, it's just giving that, and it's unfortunate if that is the case. This is all alleged. If that is the case, it's so unfortunate because it undermines what unions are for. They're supposed to be for the people. And you know, if I was somebody that was having my payroll, my pay deducted to pay these people, and I see that the interest, there's a conflict of interest in the other person's direction to pacify us. And it could possibly be a situation where it's like, verbally, this is what we're presenting. The concept and the idea. But the reality starts to seep in somewhere between now and January 15th. Meanwhile, this is the perfect photo op and publicity op to satisfy the public's perception so we can get this guy back into office. For those of you that are just joining, I think Daggett was paid off. Again, my opinion, my theories, my channel, my opinions. But we'll see. Smoke and mirrors. January 15th. Too close to January the 6th. Everybody will be distracted by that. But by then it'll probably be too late. I think that's really close to the inauguration, by the way. That's all I got. Ain't got no more. This is Mr. Fox, I Refuse podcast. This has been real. Keep it locked and loaded on the I Refuse podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. Also, follow, subscribe to the YouTube channel here. Get into our Twitter at I Refuse Podcast. Follow, subscribe there. Follow, subscribe on the Instagram at I Refuse Podcast. _ between the words. Get into the usual suspects in the I Refuse Podcast after dark, if you ever feel so inclined. And I will catch you guys later. Peace. Fendi, like the bag. This is the I Refuse.